Hey, good afternoon, friends. Hey, I wanted to kind of reach out to you today and wish you a very happy Friday, but I also wanted to start up maybe this kind of small video series each Friday. Usually I'm kind of thinking about things throughout the week that maybe coincide with the sermon going into Sunday, but maybe not so much. And so I kind of wanted to start these little kind of encouraging moments Friday if I can, maybe thoughts that I have. And I'm still thinking about a name for it. So if you've got a name for these Friday kind of video snippets, you can post it down in the comments here. Let me know. Maybe find me on Sunday and say, hey, maybe this might be a good idea for it. But I'm still thinking. And sometimes I have a lot on my mind. And unfortunately, sometimes you get to hear about the whole slew of them on Sundays. And my wife has reminded me sometimes that maybe I only need to give you 2 points instead of all the points that are in my head that day. And so I apologize for that. But I wanted to kind of come to you this Friday. And I wanted to kind of say what's been on my mind up and down, what I've been kind of struggling with a little bit. And this whole week, kind of what's I've been struggling with, or maybe to put it into a phrase that my wife always tells me or repeats to me quite frequently, actually, which is a good thing, is that comparison is a thief of joy. And I usually take and I go, yes, dear. But this week I've been finding myself kind of looking at different aspects of my life. And I find myself critically analyzing that, which is a good thing. You should do that, I think. You should always kind of look at yourself and see where your growing edges are, so to speak. But I found myself comparing myself and saying, here I could be like that person, or maybe I should strive more to be like this person, both professionally, maybe personally, in these different aspects. Sometimes it's, as a pastor, I look and I go, well, my sermons just really aren't that good, or maybe in this area of pastoralness, I could do a lot better. Or here's where I failed, and here's where I could do better. And so what I found myself doing is only doing that. And I found myself thinking about somebody else that does it, that I think does it much better. And so this whole week has been kind of like that for me. It's not always, but sometimes it is, and it happens to be that's kind of being what's whispering in my ear this time. And so I'll talk to my clergy, a mentor of mine who's clergy, and he'll tell me, you need to squash that little voice in your ear. And I'm reminded of the fact, it kind of stuck out today. So I went over, and I always do in the morning, I look at go watch over the preschool a little bit, help them out, and in the afternoons I like to go see the kids off as well. If I'm not busy doing something else, I'll go over there. But a couple times this week, they've kind of had the kids racing. All right, they'll have them in the mornings, kind of burn a little bit of energy, but also give the kids something to do, and they'll have them race to one end, and they'll race to the other end. And kind of what I found, or I noticed every so often to do, is they would race, and they would get to the end, and if they saw one of the kids kind of lagging, there was encouragement both from the teachers, but also encouragement from the kids to go back and kind of help them along. And so for them, it wasn't so much of a race. For them, it was more of a moment together. And I thought about that, and that kind of struck me today. I was helping out and around the house doing a little bit of laundry today, so that we don't have to go into the next week with still a pile of laundry to do or anything like that. But I sat there and I was thinking, here's the many things that I could do better. I really need to apologize to the church. And there's some things that we do need to come forward. And if there's ways in which we can't, or we haven't been putting full effort, that's a reasonable thing to do. But it's not reasonable to continue to beat yourself up about it. And to look at yourself still in a manner of growing in different aspects of your life. I'm also reminded when I watch those kids, I'm reminded of in the service and the many different PT tests we've taken, or I've taken throughout my 20 years in the Army and the Army Reserves here in the National Guard. And one thing that always kind of sticks out to me is that when we finish our PT test, we usually finish with a 2-mile run. That in the end, there's always the fastest runners coming in, and they're finishing out as quickly as they can, and people are just naturally runners. And then there are those who are kind of in the middle coming in, but the people who are always coming in the tail end of that running is what happens is that a few of the soldiers will get up and run back there and encourage them and run in with them and finish the race with them. And that's usually from, our fastest runners, our most athletic runners will go and they'll find them. And even if the person needs an entire whole lap, they'll go and they'll run that entire lap with them, encourage them, come on, keep going, keep going. Realizing that they're not necessarily the fastest runners, but also knowing that their encouragement is what keeps, even our slowest runners going. And it becomes less of a individual sport. It becomes less of a competition and more of a team building. And the Army is real big on that, and sends its soldiers off to different non-commissioned officer schools and officer schools, and an aspect of it is always team building. And we go through it, and it's kind of silly games we play. Some of them are good, some of them they're okay. We get the message from it. Others are real challenging, and it teaches us to really kind of come together in those challenging situations. But I think in our growth, in my experience in the Army, has been that as well, even just in simple tasks or in mundane or routine tasks that we do yearly or twice a year, or however often that we do them, as these PT tests, in which it's team building in the sense of going back and getting those who still have a little bit more to go and encouraging them and walking with them. And so I guess part of what I want to do is encourage you today. As we end this week and everybody's tired and it's been a long week, maybe you've had a good week, maybe you haven't had such a good week, I want to encourage you to continue on the race and continue to move forward. And if you find yourself beating yourself up because maybe, you could have done something much better, maybe your skill sets isn't so strong in this area, but you have skill sets in this area, I want to encourage you that Paul reminds us that we all are different aspects of the body and that we all serve a purpose. The feet can't be the hands, and the hands can't be the feet, and the eyes can't be the nose, and the nose can't be the eyes, and on and on and on. And that we all serve a purpose. Paul also reminds us in his letter that we all have different gifts of prophecy, of teaching, of preaching. And we need to kind of focus on those at times as well. One of the things that people have said to me, especially either coming to new churches, and I heard it most recently going into the chaplaincy, is that I got asked. They asked me. I had a senior chaplain ask me, what unit are you in? And I said, hey, I'm at this unit. And they said, oh, I remember the chaplain that was there before you. I said, yeah, I've heard about him. And they go, you've got big shoes to fill. And I've heard that from other places too, both in the pastorate and outside and other, whenever you precede someone, or maybe you precede someone that was a little bit further ahead of you in the sense that was the beloved and everybody loved that person and they did a great job. And I always hear, I've heard in the past, you have these big shoes to fill. And I go, man, I understand where the spirit comes from of that word, but of that saying, but I'm like, man, wow. Immediately you think, well, I got to be like that person. I've got to do everything that they have to do. And sometimes we don't meet those expectations. And guaranteed we probably won't meet those expectations because we aren't that person. But we can meet non-specific expectations. What I mean is that we can meet the expectations as pastors in a pastoral role, maybe not in the same way before us, but in different ways that meet our strengths. In the same way, we have different strengths in our own Christian walk. Some of us struggle with anger, and maybe some of us struggle with depression, maybe some of us struggle with just knowing what to do in the right moment and talking. But we have strengths in other things, and so we might not meet the expectations in certain aspects, but we can meet the overall expectations of our Christian walk in the aspects that are our strengths. In the same way that those little kids racing, that we can always go back and help those in the race to continue forward. And so I get asked, so with that question, I ask myself, are we supposed to be the people that are supposed to meet the expectation, or are we supposed to be the people that goes back to pick up those who are maybe a little behind? And so I think, should we be these people or that people? And I think the answer really is yes in both of those. we should both be the people that strive always to grow in our growing edges, the places where we kind of fall a little bit short on, but we need to continue to strive and push ourselves in our Christian walk in that sense. If we're a person that struggles with forgiving others, we should strive to continue to push ourselves in that direction to forgive. If we're someone who struggles with maybe some anger, sadness, struggles with looking at always the bad side instead of looking at the good side, that we should strive to push ourselves to be a little bit better in those aspects of it, maybe in small little walks. But we're called to be those people that continues on the race, never quitting. See, those little kids never quit, and even in the Army PT test, I've noticed soldiers, they don't quit, they don't stop running, they don't quit at the very, before the end. We should also be the other person on the other side that goes back and catches up and continues to walk and run and encourage them. Not push them, but encourage them forward in each and every step that they take. And I think that's important for us to know. And I think that's important for us to know both when we fail at, in different aspects that we think we can do so much better in, that it's okay and that we need to just get back up and we need to continue to push ourselves, because we don't do everything perfectly the first time. But that there is a God in heaven who continues to shower out upon us or rain upon us his grace and his mercy and his love, because all he desires is for us to get back up and continue on the endurance of the race, or continue in the endurance of the race, as Paul also mentions to us many times. But also I think that we should be a people that goes back for others. It's a yes and a yes. And Paul also strives and tells us that to not leave anybody behind that we see struggling, to lift them up. If they're struggling in their sins, we walk with them. And we don't always just we can call the sin forward, but we don't sit there and poke at them about it. We encourage them to walk through it on the other side, to push it off and to continue to be strong against it. And if they're struggling in different aspects of their life, maybe in their faith, maybe they're going through a hard time, we also are the ones to go back and pick them up and continue to walk with them, ensuring them that God loves them and that there is grace for them, both in their sins, but also that there is love for them. There's love for them whenever they are struggling and they feel alone. And so I think the answer is both. And so in this, as we end this week, go into the weekend knowing that you are loved and that there is grace in whatever you're struggling with. That even though we may sometimes stumble throughout the week, that we always have the opportunity to get back up. And also going into this next week here, if you see and know of somebody struggling, go and pick them up and walk with them. Because our calling is that as well. This is not an individual religion. This is not one in which we're only good as if we're good with God, but we're good when we're in an environment in which we're with God, but also with others. So that's our calling. And I think that is the love. There's grace and love enough from God for us all. And so go into this next week with that knowledge and that peace and the love of God that walks with you each and every day and minute of your life.